Good afternoon and welcome to the second of the Mokulito workshops. We're going to actually be looking at this afternoon how we develop a Mokulito or wooden lithography plate. In front of me here I have a piece of plywood, exactly the same depth and standard as the one I was using on my demonstration. What I've done to one surface, I've selected the surface I want, this side or that side, because of the grain. The grain does show through the print, so have a look at that, choose that, and then give it a light sand with a very light household sandpaper, and then finally with a tiny bit of wire wool. Try to keep it in the grain. It's literally, you're just smoothing off the very worst of the grain and any residual layers of grease. So I'll just do the finishing bit there. Now, lithography is based on the principles of oil and water resisting. The marks you make on a lithographic stone, metal plate, wooden plate, they are based on oil-based materials, so anything that has contents of oil. When you ink up, you keep your printing plate damp, and oil-based ink is attracted to your oily marks, and the rest of the plate holds onto the water and stays damp as you perpetually sponge it down, and therefore resists the oil-based ink. And this will become clearer as we work through the process. So all you need to know when drawing is any mark you draw is a positive mark. It will appear black if we're working with black ink. In front of me here I have a series of specialist lithography tools, drawing materials, and also this is this happens to be just my children's oil-based crayons and some vegetable oil, again just from the household cupboard. I've got here, these are lithography crayons. They come in different grades, and when I say grades I mean some of them are really soft and sticky and some of them are really hard to the feel. We will see how that affects our drawing. In this sort of glass Tupperware here, it's a liquid sort of brown stuff. It's this. Let's make sure that's on. It's lithographic drawing ink, and it is a really good substance to create very strong marks. You draw with it with a dip pen brush. It allows you to be quite fluid. Here I have, it's another form of these crayons, but it's a lithographic drawing pencil. It's one of the ones where you kind of have to keep peeling the paper off in a great big spiral and it reveals more. But it's a nice one to hold. Got a few things here. I've already mentioned about the brushes and the dip pen. This is just to create splat marks. You can use an old toothbrush. This is a lithographic rubbing, I call them rubbing stick. Come in a block. And it's a really oily, hard substance which you can warm up with your fingers and smudge on, so it creates kind of smudge marks. Now the thing about Mokulito is you're working with a grain of wood. In this case this is birch ply, it's a very strong grain, and so it won't be as sensitive as a charcoal drawing. You have to know that, and you have to kind of work with that. It has its own characteristics. So things like smudging, which I've just mentioned, which in charcoal are very soft and ephemeral. Here it will be there, but it will have some wood grain coming through it. So again, just be aware of this. Here I've got an old piece of lino and just a cork, and we're going to use these as a demonstration of creating stamps onto the surface. So let's start. And this, I'm not doing drawing, we're going to do this quite sort of technically and label everything, because lithography is, if you're new to it, it kind of is a bit of a head twist and you have to get your head around things. So first of all I'm going to use the number 4, which is labelled as extra hard. They come as a square crayon, and I'm going to press really hard to start with, straight on the surface of the wood, and then I'm going to do 3 lines, each one getting consecutively lighter. That one wasn't much lighter, so I'm going to do another line. There you go, that's lighter. And I'm going to label this backwards, because you are still printing in reverse, 4. It's obvious it's the crayon, it's a square section, so I'm not going to label any more than that. The next crayon next to it is 0, which is extra soft. And if you get these crayons mixed up, Just stick your sort of nail in it and it's really obvious the difference. It's the same principle again. And the soft one, you can see it's really rich and black and it lays down a lot of grease and oil on the surface. And it's quite a different mark. So again, thankfully 0 is 0 in reverse. That makes it easier. Going to go with the litho crayon in a drawing form, and I'm going to do some wiggles because actually it's easier to draw wiggly things and more fluid things when you're kind of holding it as you would a pencil. But again, I'm going to get lighter. I'm also going to do some dashes with this one. Just a selection of lighter dashes. Drawing pencil. So my mother used to be able to write cursively in mirror writing. In fact, she wrote a whole history exam in mirror writing as a sort of statement of why on earth is she doing this history exam in the first place. And so she obviously failed because the whole thing was in mirror writing, but it was an impressive feat. So there we go, got a few testers going down. I'm going to do the rubbing stick. Again, it's really hard, but then as you work it and you rub it, and I'm just going to, you see what it happens. And if you were working on a litho stone or even plate, it would pick up all that beautiful smudge. It is less subtle on the Mokulito, significantly so. But either way, this stuff is really greasy. You may not see some of these marks, but there's a lot of grease in there, and lithography is, you have to know the amount of grease in your tool, because even if you can't see it, like an oil, there's a huge amount of oil and grease in that, so it will turn out quite black. And I'm now going to just do a very light one there. That's kind of pretty obvious what it is, but just to practice my mirror writing, see if I can do this inherited trick. I can do it singly, that's easy. Rubbing, what did I say? I say rubbing, I'm going to call it a lump. I'm sure there's a technical term. Rubbing lump, there we go. So they're done. Got an oil pastel here, happens to be purple, could be anything. I'm going to do a similar, going lighter gradation. Oil pastel. And as I say, this is pure sort of technical breakdown of what we can do. I just realised earlier on in the film I said this is lithographic drawing ink. That's actually incorrect. It's lithographic touche, which is a very different thing. It's used to create washes, the effect of washes, which do and don't work in Mokulito. You have to be kind of relaxed about. They might not be like a beautiful watercolour effect, but they do something quite interesting. So I'm going to kind of show you how to do that and what I tend to do now. I'm going to use it first of all neat. That means I'm just going to stick a paintbrush in and I'm just going to do a simple shape. It's light brown, but that will ink up solid black. And no matter, if I do another one, I can't press lightly with it. It is like drawing with drawing ink straight from the tub. And you can also use a dip pen with it, and it's really sensitive to creating very fine lines. If you go with the grain on wood, as you can imagine, it's quite easy to draw these lines. If you go against the grain, it kind of splurges out because it's quite liquidy to go with the grain, and you'll see that when we ink it up, but that's kind of cool. So actually I should write touche. I always have to check how to spell this, not that it matters. T-U. Touche is quite expensive. T-U-S-C-H-E. So it's one of those things that if you go to an open access printmaking studio, they might have a stock of it if they do lithographic mediums. So if I were you, I would either invest in a bit with some friends so you will share it around, or you can get smaller quantities as well, but it tends to be sold in quite sort of big containers. But it does last. I mean, that one's given to me by a friend and it must be like 15 years old. It does last quite a while. You see, I've just quickly cut a mask. It's just a square, and I'm going to use that. I'm going to dip this wire brushy thing in the touche, and I'm going to I want to just go in the crayon area. I don't mind it going outside the mask, that's fine. Just did a bit of speckling. I like a good speckle. And you can see the edges start to bleed with the grain of the wood, but you do end up with a nice clean mark. Touche is quite difficult to get off. I'm not too bothered by what's on my hands as long as it's not white spirits. But if you do want to wear gloves at that point, please do. What else are we doing with the touche? We've done that. Next I'm going to, before we get into washes, this is just the vegetable oil. This sometimes doesn't work. It's kind of, it's a bit hit and miss. But I just want to see if it works this time, then you can see what you can do with stuff at home. This will, in theory, create a nice black line because it's obviously incredibly greasy. So I'm just going to, hopefully you'll be able to see that. You can see it as a film. There's no point in me doing gradation. But I am going to see if I can get some brush marks. This is quite a stiff old brush. And actually, I'm just going to get another brush from the closet, so to speak. And with the touche, I'm just going to see if we can get some nice, there you go, sort of edge of a brush, gestural brush mark. Cool. I am going to label that oil with this. I'm going to do it downwards, oil, because it would be difficult to see, and if it does work, we need to know it's different from the touche. Got a tiny square down here. Oh, nice splat there, I've just noticed. Which we're going to do a wash. I'm going to do a water wash with the touche. You can also do other types of washes. Just getting some standard tap water. When you get into sort of more, I mean, wooden lithography is quite, it's not the sort of perfectionist lithography. You can get some phenomenal results, and I love it. It works well with my aesthetic, but it's not sort of the real pure lithography where you can get really particular about your washes and create some stunning results. This is a kind of more just, okay, I know what's working. It might not, you know, but you do create a toolbox of what works and what marks work and what effects work, and then it's about having a go, and it's a great introduction to lithography. So I've got just a brush. No, not that one. That one I dipped into the touche. There we go. Another brush coming out of the closet. Nice brush here. I'm actually going to wet this whole area down here where I'm going to do the wash. It's quite a lot of water. Move that out of the way. And then I'm going to kind of just, you can see I've dipped the touche in the corners, and I'm going to do the edges so we see the outline of our square rectangle of water, and then we'll see what effects and what bleeds it happened. You can see it's bleeding rather beautifully. And I'm just going to leave it like that and let it, you know, do its thing whilst we do one more thing. And the last thing we're going to do is stamping. I'm going to trim this piece of lino off just to fit in there. And I do like combining sort of, you know, if you've got some scrap lino cuts or some, you know, anything that has a relief surface around the house can be printed, used as a stamp. So, you know, lace works really nicely, that sort of thing. Now, again, this is me being a bit maverick, I suppose, and a bit probably not following the rules. I tend to, if I'm going to stamp it on, I either use a bit of oil-based ink, and I just pat that on, because obviously oil-based ink has an inherent oil quality, and I then stamp that on, and that should have a result in the wood. Or I use a bit of the touche and I paint that on. It's obviously quite watery, so you'll get a bleed. So what I'm going to do today is going to get the oil-based ink out. This is just standard oil-based ink. You can probably get away with using oil paint. I actually have no oil paint in the house. I'm not a oil paint artist in the slightest. And again, the maverick in me, I'm just dipping my hand in the oil paint. And I'm just dabbling it over. Feel free at this stage to get it at printmaking roller out so you don't get the inky finger. You know, I'm just applying the amount you would apply if you were doing a standard relief print on paper. And I'm going to stamp that. Actually, first of all, I'm going to overlay it to our spotty square here because I want to show you a bit of overlay. I'm just pushing it down. There we go. Actually, I changed my mind. I'm now going to do the cork. I'm going to do the cork. So again, I'm just, please use a roller if you wish. This is me being really, how not to look after your hands. And you see, nice shape there. And I'm just going to do the ghost, which without applying more ink is the second impression. What I'm also going to do, I've got a nice black finger. One of the things I really like to do a lot is fingerprints. So this is a case of where I can fit it now. Blob. I'm just going to do them all the way up until, because also a fingerprint, if that was on a stone or a zinc plate, it would pretty much replicate, depending how you grained it, that. Mokulito will not, because you've got a grain of the wood going in amongst the grain of my finger. So we'll see how and what happens with that. I think that's pretty much everything. You can see already a wonderful range of marks you can get and what you can do. What I'm going to do now is, this is still quite wet here where we did the water and the touche. I'm going to let that dry, and then we're going to, in the next video, I'm going to show you how you etch it and prepare it for printing, which will be, I'll be filming that once this water's dry, so that will be immediately afterwards. Thank you very much for listening so far, and we'll meet again in 10 minutes or so.